Hey Crossroads, for the past couple months we've been going through a series on Psalm 23 called Unfazed. This has been a great reminder of how Jesus is our good shepherd, and we can trust him to lead us through anything that life throws our way. Now, as we lead up to the Easter season, we'll be starting a new series on March 14th called The Cross. And in this clip, which was taken in mid-January during a brainstorming session with Pastor Dan, you'll see a little bit of the themes and topics that Pastor Dan will be covering throughout this series. I hope you enjoy.
I'm thinking of the first three, which would spill into Good Friday, would be basically the purpose of the cross. So I want to take three big words, freedom, forgiveness, and justice on those 3 Sundays. And the purpose of the cross, I think it'll be real practical. Like, what does freedom look like for us? What does forgiveness mean and look like? I was dealing with somebody very, very recently that they just had a hard time thinking they were screwed up all their life. They've never been able to overcome this or that. But the thing that I was reminded of was in Psalm 32. He clears our record of guilt. People got to get their head around forgiveness. And I think it's Psalm 130 says, if God kept a record of sins, who could stand? So when you come to the cross, your record is cleared. When you come next week with something you've done again, it's not like there's a whole, it's this event you're dealing with, that's it. So forgiveness is a big concept, and justice, how the cross accomplished real justice. We'll talk about that. And then coming out the other side, the practice of resurrection. And I calling that specifically the practice of resurrection. It's a term that was coined by somebody that Eugene Peterson picked up that I learned from him. But the practice of resurrection is, there's 3 big practices in Ephesians chapter 1 that open themselves up to us. And I'll tell you why I call it practice in a minute. One is prayer, one is hope, and one is power. And Paul in Ephesians 1 ties all 3 of those to resurrection. And the practice of prayer, these are things that don't come full blown, but you actually begin to live into in the light of what Jesus did. So when the curtain was torn and God raised Jesus from the dead, he said we actually, the whole deal was we can come right into the presence of the Father. So we'll talk about the significance of that. And then in terms of hope, Paul's prayer in Ephesians 1 is that we would know the hope to which he's called us. Peter talks about the resurrection in terms of a living hope. But that again is practice too, because we have to keep practicing lifting our eyes higher and setting our eyes on things above. And then power, he talks about his incomparably power there, incomparably great power for those that believe. It's the same power that he exerted, Paul says, when he raised Christ from the dead. So in terms of the practice of the power, clearly we all need to practice at that because we try and do it in our own strength. We try and, we don't trust him. But that term practice is a really good one for some of the big rocks of the resurrection in Ephesians 1 that Paul talks about. I mean, you could do, as I've thought about this, and I know pastors that have done it, you could do 20 on the cross, and you could 20 on the resurrection, but, I think I just want to grab 3 of the big rock things that are just core to what Jesus did, and then 3 things that if we can get a hold of in terms of practicing resurrection, they would change our lives. They really would. The problem with a lot of people, me included, is we get forgiveness. I understand that. And I know that if I come to him, I'll get forgiveness if I confess my sin. My problem is, how do I stop sinning? Mm-hmm. That's a lot of people's problem, is how do we change? And I think that's the practice of resurrection. That here's how we live into, it's living the resurrection. Here's how change occurs. And so by grabbing onto the first chapter of Ephesians, especially the prayer there, that whole book is about living the resurrection and being who we are. Really, that's when you come to the New Testament, the second bit of all the letters or epistles. The ethic, the ethic of the Christian life, the New Testament, is just be who you are. That's what it is, be who you are. So I think Paul sets us up well for that in Ephesians 1. If you want to be who you are, you got to come to the Father and hear and listen. You got to draw on his power, and hope changes you. Hope changes you. And by this hope, Bible says we're purified. So hope is a great practice in terms of resurrection too. It's how we become who we are.